Deputy Foreign Minister, thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, let's start from what made some headlines in world news today. Russian officials confirmed that Moscow received from Damascus what Syrian government calls the evidence that the radical rebels are behind the chemical attack, deadly chemical attack that reportedly killed hundreds of civilians, including children here in Syria last month. So what kind of evidence is that?
This is a new material for us, but this is not already a completely new material for the UN. I'll explain. The Syrian authorities have conducted their own sampling and investigation, analysis of what is available in terms of possible evidence of rebels, quote unquote, being responsible for tragic episodes both on August 21st, but beyond that also August 22nd, 3rd and 4th, so on 4 episodes. And this material, which was collected by the Syrian authority some days ago, was discreetly handed over to Åke Sellström, the head of UN mission here, mission of experts which came and investigated the Ghouta incident, but never did so on the 3 subsequent incidents. And then Sellström was asked to look into it and eventually factor this new evidence into the final report of Sellström's mission. It never happened, in fact. And this is one of the reasons why we criticize the speed with which report was released the day before yesterday in New York, and also an incomplete contents of this report. Now, we have received this very material from the Syrian authority while our delegation was in Damascus yesterday, September 17th, and today, September 18th. We are in the process of studying it. We have just completed translation of this Arabic material in Arabic into Russian, which is time-consuming and rather difficult. Now the experts in Moscow, those who have an idea, contrary to myself, who has no idea whatsoever on this, can conclude what the chemistry says, what medical analysis says, how different charts, how different parts of chemical substance here and there fit together, whether this is credible, whether this is something that really underpins the case that those terrorists, those bastards are behind this terrible attack and attacks, I would say. It's premature for me to give any conclusion, to share any firm view with you on this particular issue. It should be done in a very professional manner, quietly, but if and when we have a conclusion, we will definitely share it with UN. And we expect the UN Secretariat to both send Sellström and his people back to Syria to continue investigation on the 3 remaining incidents, and also to write the full and comprehensive report against the background of all information they have received, collected themselves and received from Syrian authority.
You mentioned a UN report on chemical attack here in Syria. You also before called this report politicized and biased. Could you please explain us why?
I stay with my words. This report is politicized and biased. It served the interest of, once again, heating up the whole issue of responsibility in the absence of the full picture. I mean, you cannot conclude on something not knowing exactly what happened. And, you know, efforts to disregard completely brush off something that has already been provided by Russia, something which Minister Lavrov daily speaks about, namely evidence in forms of interviews, evidence in forms of pointing out incompatibility of some conclusions drawn from the picture as we know it, as was presented by the US in their own report, that something like this should not be simply, nullified and cannot be disregarded. It should be looked into thoroughly, professionally, with due attention to arguments, and only after debate, after proper discussion, one may have a conclusion on something. This is what Russia advocates all along.
Even before this investigation was launched, the UN team said that they will not answer the question exactly who is behind the attack.
And they never answered it.
So you think that this is the main weak point of this report?
No, I would say this is probably one of the few areas where the UN mission, kept the word, if you wish. There is no finger pointing whatsoever, but the very way how a report is laid out brings a reader to a conclusion which is kind of prejudged already. We favor a very different approach. Our own report on March 19th incident that was written by Russian experts, if you look into it, well, of course it's confidential in terms of, its working paper shared with the UN, and it's no more our quote-unquote intellectual property right. You will see there that we go through chemical specifics, analysis, conclusions of how things may not fit into the picture of government authorities using chemical weapons. This is the conclusion which is based on 90 pages of systematic chemical, mathematical, medical, biological analysis. I haven't seen what is written in Russian after the translation of the Syrian documents was made, but I suspect they have done something of the same. And this is the approach which should be also followed and pursued by Sellstrom's team. We invite them to do so. We think they should go back to Syria to continue investigation and then have something different from, yes, a biased initial report.
Of course, that Syria's chemical disarmament topped the agenda of all the meetings you had here in Damascus. You've been here for 2 days already. According to the agreement that Moscow and Washington reached earlier in Geneva, Syria now has just a few days to provide a full list of its chemical stockpiles. I know that it's not Russia's responsibility to monitor this process, but of course I can expect that you've discussed that with your Syrian colleagues. So how it is progressing right now?
Speaking on what we have done here, I would say one of the main tasks which I had with me to accomplish, one of the major instructions I received from Minister Lavrov before I departed for Damascus was to thoroughly go through, together with Syrian counterparts, point for point, everything which they should do according to their newly acquired obligations as a party to a chemical weapon conventions, multiplied, so to say, by very stringent requirements set forth in the Russian-American framework as agreed by Minister Lavrov and Secretary Kerry in Geneva. It's an extraordinarily difficult task. It's something that has not happened before. So we used much of our time here with the Syrian colleagues to thoroughly go through, point for point, step for step, trin for trin, the sequencing on events, the amount of information they should share, the degree of their openness towards the chemical weapons organization on prohibition of chemical weapons, and also on the issue, as you mentioned, they indeed have to, they should, they must provide this initial information before this week runs out. Actually, before they confirmed that they will do so, I never asked them for a copy, but I have a great deal of confidence that it will actually happen. But it will happen in The Hague.
You also mentioned after the meeting with Syria's foreign minister that Damascus is well aware of the consequences that could follow in case that if Syria fails to comply. So does Damascus understand the importance of this listing, and are they aware?
That's my impression. Oh, absolutely, that's my impression. Yes, they do.
Another very important point is that Syria has to remove or destroy its chemical weapons by mid-2014. Is this deadline realistic, actually?
I think it is, although given the kind of situation the country is in right now, it may require further enhancement of security arrangements. It would require additional measures to ensure safety, not least in the case of transportation. It's not for nothing that Russia and the US agreed in Geneva on so-called hybrid formula. We need to let professionals, that is OPWC, speak first in terms of what is best, how much of this stuff should be moved around, where is the place where it should be destroyed, whether there is any need to think of possible removal of this type of things out of a country, although here in parentheses, as a remark on the margins, I would say that formally speaking, the convention prohibits the removal of chemical weapons from the country in which they are. But the extraordinary character of all this may require some extraordinary decisions as well. So we are open-minded, and we enter into this discussion with the Syrians, listen to their arguments, engage them in a very professional manner. We identify liaison officers. We know who would stand for what. We know how their newly, or rather, forthcoming mission in The Hague would operate. All this is just at the very beginning, and we focused on this to a great extent. It's a very professional kind of meetings I've had, more technical rather than political, and it's very gratifying what kind of response I've received from my Syrian colleagues.
So is Russia concerned that this sensitive process of removing or destroying chemical weapons could be used by some forces, maybe those who are currently operating in the country on fighting against the current government, as a provocation? Do you have any of these fears?
Be very guarded against any provocations. We are concerned of possible provocations. We had seen it before, that the moment something better, positive, is out there, is looming, you will always find skurks who, you know, would try immediately to change these dynamics and, you know, establish a new reality, so to say, through a provocation. And I believe our Syrian colleagues are very much aware of it, very much aware of it. I do think that even people very critically oriented towards the authorities here and government, with whom we also met while in Damascus, do not underestimate the dangers related to this type of provocations.
Thank you very much, and let's hope that we see now the beginning of what could be a peaceful solution and an end to Syria's crisis.
This is definitely my hope, and we will work further that this hope transforms into a reality.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maria.
Спасибо, Sergey.
Спасибо.